Setting you up for Clemson spring football. We have made our way through quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. We're hitting the offensive line, a key spot for Clemson to reach their goals this year. We got Jason Priester here, of course, from allclemsontigers.com. Jason, always good to see you. This offensive line is a big question mark. It has been a trouble spot during this slight decline here in the last few years. But Matt Luke, I know you're impressed with him. I've been impressed with him at other stops. People like him. They know that he can get the job done. And sometimes that's the key to an offensive line, is getting the right offensive line coach, because I think by and large, they have more to do with the productivity of that position than any other position group, because there's just so many things to mix and match and so many different combinations up front that you need that guy that knows, okay, this may not be the best five, but this is the best combination. And the development of the offensive line and the offensive lineman seems to be more so than any other position.
Yeah, you said it in the opening. Key spot. This is going to be one of the key storylines for Clemson this spring, is how that offensive line starts to progress under the direction of Matt Luke. Clemson was not very good up front last year for at least for most of the season. They had their moments, the Notre Dame game. There were spots in that Kentucky game, but still in the bowl game they allowed a bunch of sacks. It was just there was a lot of ugly last year. It wasn't all bad all the time, but there was a lot more bad than good. And here we are with a new offensive line coach, and Dabo Swinney goes out and gets one of the best, a guy that had actually stepped away from college football for a couple of years, and entices him to come back. And, this group, I have said for years that I don't think Clemson's had a talent problem along that offensive line. On paper, if you look how they've recruited, they've got more talent on paper probably than they've ever had. It's just we've not seen the results. They've not translated. I think you got a guy in place now that can do that, and Clemson has the luxury of getting 4 starters back. You got to replace your center, probably the most important part of that offensive line. But other than that, you get all the other 4 starters who started game 1 back for this season. 2 of those guys missed big chunks last year. Walker Parks missed most of the season. Marcus Tate got hurt and ended up missing the rest of the season. But they should be pretty healthy there too. It's going to be a big spring for those guys.
So the center position in particular, who do you think is going to take over there?
Ryan Linthicum is a guy that's been in the program a few years now, and he's patiently waited his turn. He's not had very many opportunities to get out on the field. They've let him develop and come along at his own pace. They've not needed to play him because they've had older, more experienced guys in front of him. I assume he'll get first crack. We'll see if he can win the job. Maybe they give Harris Sewell a look there. I think he's a guy that, if needed, he could slide over there and play center. He got a lot of experience as a freshman last year at guard while those 2 starters were injured. He's a guy that's got a really high ceiling. I think Ian Reed, who redshirted last season, is a guy that can play some center for you if needed. So that's a job that's going to be wide open. And Linthicum was, he was fairly highly touted coming out of high school, at least by a couple of the services, and people have wondered why he's not gotten on the field faster than he has, and sometimes offensive linemen need a couple, 2-3 years, and Linthicum seems to be one of those guys. But we'll see if he can grab that bull by the horns. He's going to get his opportunity this year with Will Putnam moving on.
So aside from the center spot, it sounds like they're pretty well set across the other positions, or at least 3 out of the 4. Are there, how many guys do you think are in the mix for these starting spots?
I don't know that anything's settled other than Blake Miller over at right tackle. Tristan Lee, who played at left tackle started at left tackle most of last season. He even moved inside and played some guard last year. So, there's different ways Matt Luke can go about, trying to get the best 5 on the field. There's a lot of versatility among those offensive linemen. Some of them can play inside and outside. So we might see some mixing and matching. like I said, Harris Sewell played some guard last year. I think he's a guy that can play center. And there's some young guys we haven't seen yet. Zach Owens is a guy, big guy that's redshirted last year who could maybe make some noise this year. I remember Matt Luke telling us in his introductory press conference that he'd like to have 7 or 8 guys you can rely on, because injuries are going to happen. And I think I think they'll have that kind of depth. We'll see where this thing shakes out once they get through spring, because I could see some mixing and matching going on and things maybe not being quite or looking identical to the way they looked game 1 last year.